Excellent, thank you. Welcome to the meeting. We have agenda papers and other relevant information for public viewing on the council website. The council is streaming this meeting live on the YouTube channel for Herefordshire Council, and is also making a recording which will be available publicly afterwards. Other attendees are permitted to film, photograph or record our public meeting, provided that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. We don't have any members of the public with us today in the room, but so there's no alternative filming for us to have to deal with. To ensure that the recording quality is maintained, could members please speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum? And if you haven't done so already, can you take a moment to ensure that your mobile phones and other noisy devices are turned to silent? We have some members of the board who are joining us remotely today, and I'll now ask them to confirm that they can hear and see us and check that we can hear them. So, do we have a list of members who are attending remotely? Councillor Baker? Councillor Baker, there, hello, I see you. Can you see me?
Thank you, Chair.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Right. Present in the room today, we have the remainder of the committee members. Rather than asking you to introduce yourselves in a big round robin now, if you would like to introduce yourselves briefly when you ask your first question, I'm very happy that you do it that way. We also have the chairs, in addition to committee members making us politically proportional, we have the chairs of all of the other scrutiny committees with us today, and welcome to all of you. We also have officers in the room with us. And we have Rachel Hart, you representing the finance team. Yeah. Thank you for joining us today. We also have Daniel Webb, our statutory scrutiny officer, Simon Cann, our democratic services officer, and Alfie Rees-Dinos, our technical support. Do we have any apologies for absence?
No apologies that we received.
Great, thanks very much. No need to do named substitutes in that case. We have quite a short agenda, but nevertheless, for completeness, declarations of interest. Do any members of the committee have any declarations of interest in respect of items that we have on the agenda today? No, that's fine. If you become aware of an interest at any point in the discussion, just signal and we can pick it up then. Moving on to item 4 then, the minutes of the previous meeting. We need to sign and approve the minutes of the meetings held on the 9th and on the 17th. My goodness, we're going back to January 2023. That's all quite budgety stuff, isn't it? Yes. Are there any proposed corrections or issues of accuracy that have been flagged?
Not from me, Chair. I've not received any.
Right, okay. Can I have a proposer for accepting the minutes?
Since I was their chair, and I'm Louis Stark, by the way. Since I was their chair, I think I should propose them.
Thanks very much, Councillor Stark. And do we have a seconder? Councillor Fabian, thank you very much. So if we can just take the vote on that, those in favour of accepting the minutes as an accurate record. So those in for.
Chair, just to clarify, I think only those who actually attended the meeting are able to vote on those. So I think it will just be the three of you, I believe, that decided. Tony, were you at the meeting as well?
Okay, in that case.
So it's those two, I believe. But as a chair, you are permitted to receive and
brilliant. Okay, in that case, those that can vote have voted. Well done. Thank you. I will sign those at the end of the meeting then. Have we received any written questions from members of the public?
There's been one question received from a member of the public. The response to that question has been published as a supplementary agenda item.
Thank you. And has that member of the public offered us a supplementary question?
Yes, they did. The supplementary question from Mr. Peter McKay was, could you advise from which committees replies are awaited? The response to that question from Democratic Services was, dear Mr. McKay, the suggestion has been passed to the chair of the Connected Communities Scrutiny Committee. The suggestion will be added as an item to the committee's long list for consideration when it discusses and approves its work programme at its next meeting on 13th of September 2023.
Right, thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. McKay, for continuing to ask questions about footpaths and rights of way. I know it's a topic that you've taken a long-standing interest in, and I'm sure it'll be considered along with the other work programme items by Connected Communities. So thank you for your question. Have we received any written questions from members of the council?
No questions received from members of the council.
Okay, thank you. So we're at the first substantive item of committee business, the financial strategy work programme at item 7. And this is to provide a draft terms of reference and suggested work programme to the Scrutiny Management Board for our work in scrutinising the Council's financial strategy and its budget setting process, which will probably be starting around about now and continuing through to budget setting in January, February time. So I invite members of the committee to ask questions and make comments. I'll take the report as having been read. Councillor Starr.
Yes. You won't be surprised that I do have some thoughts on it. The board is in a difficult position because of the transition from one administration to another chair. And at the moment, the documents we have on the table are the documents from the previous administration, the MTFS, the capital programme and the other financial plans that they had. I suspect we will have to work, at least initially as a board, in actually moving forward as if they are still extant, because we obviously haven't received any new plans from the executive, but we are at a disadvantage in that respect, Chair, and we just need to bear that in mind, that whatever we may come out with at this current time, that we have to be prepared to be flexible and to respond to any new plans that might emerge as a result, not only of the new administration's plans, but of course of the different economic context with different inflation projections, different interest rate projections. All these issues do need to come out, and that's just a caution I want to just raise with the board as a whole, that we, when moving forward, think that we may very well have to suddenly change course, and I'm quite happy that we just bear that in mind here.
Well, thank you for highlighting that. I think, equally, the new administration inherits that budget and that 4-year medium-term financial strategy, and a 4-year county plan, the last year of which we are in the middle of now, and we will expect them to add to that and tweak it as necessary, along with the other budgeting documents. But I think for our purposes, the medium-term financial strategy, because it is a 4-year document, at least 3 years of it will be relevant to the context in which the budget is going to be being developed and set. And whereas it may contain some assumptions that will need to be adjusted to reflect the current external financial and economic situation, it's a pretty good document for us to look at early on in our work programme, I think, because it has got that longitudinal view going out several years. So it's a good starting point for us, I think, with those caveats recognised by the committee that there may be a different flavour and a different set of priorities that will be overlaid it in coming to a new budget. Councillor Fagan.
Thank you, Chair. Just carrying on from that point that Councillor Stark made, in the minutes of the January meeting from the Scrutiny Management Board, there were a couple of points about that which sort of looked at how we get the highest potential return on investments made by council through its minimum revenue provisions review. So, and then also that it was on page 10 resolved that the investment strategy be brought back to the Scrutiny Management Board to consider higher yield investment strategies for security, liquidity and yield for 23-24. So I imagine that these are ongoing issues, but they do sort of link back to the previous work of the Scrutiny Management Board. So I think we just need to sort of try and take those points on board as we sort of develop our work programme.
Yeah, well, I think the table that's set out at paragraph 9 in the financial strategy report does take on board some of the comments that were made in the previous board's review of the budget, and I think that tried to take those into account. Daniel, have you got anything additional that you can add to that?
I think so. Very succinctly, indeed, they're covered at the moment in paragraph 9. There's a section there, one of the two of the highlighted 4 areas that are proposed to the committee are around maximising income through revenue and charging, and another one focusing on the treasury management strategy, which I think will answer that other point. So it is obviously, on the one hand, it is continuing the work of the previous committee. But I would also stress, of course, as a new administration, you are free to set your own work programmes, disregard the previous administrations, if you wish to.
Yeah, and draw Councillor Chowns.
When you finished, I'm just waiting. Yeah.
Well, I was just about to draw the committee's attention to that paragraph, which has got the detail of both briefings and also suggested topics for future committee meetings in it. And then Councillor Chowns.
Thanks. Yeah, my question was going to be about para 9 specifically on page 22. So it's really useful to have that set out, and I particularly welcome the structure of having a set of briefings in addition to formal meetings, because I think that there's a lot of kind of background material that it would be useful for members of this committee, but actually more broadly for all members to have access to. And I'm a bit of a stuck record on this, but I would like us to have a really regular, at least monthly briefing slot for all councillors about specific topics, a whole range of them. But we could easily fill that with a monthly briefing on aspects of financial strategy, certainly over the next 6 months. I think that, so I would specifically suggest that we perhaps make the briefing sessions briefings for all members, potentially open to all members. I think it's really useful to have the briefing before the meeting that considers it, and that isn't always the case here. So, for example, we've got a committee meeting in September which looks at income and charging, but a briefing in October which looks at asset management for value and for income. So, and we're looking at the briefing in December on how councils use their borrowing power after we've had their committee meeting in November looking at an investment programme. And they're really, really tightly interlinked, although they're they're set out as two separate things, A and B, in the list of the 4 priorities. So I just wonder if we should front load some of the briefing a little bit more so that all members of the committee have had briefing on general principles of asset management, for example, and general principles of how councils use their borrowing power. Also had a bit of an opportunity to understand what's been done thus far in Herefordshire Council with respect to that, so that then we can have a really informed committee meeting where we look at some of the detail of what we currently do and potentially what more this committee might like to recommend. I think that the capital investment programme is really crucially important, so I wouldn't want to move that later really in the budget process, but I think we might want to have more than one bite of that cherry, certainly reviewing the capital investment programme.
Thank you for those comments. I think one of the things that we struggled with in putting this draft programme together is recognising that it would have been good for us to have been able to start earlier on in the year, but because it's an election year, we haven't been able to do that. So it's a case of thinking about what the committee can usefully do to make an input to the budgeting process and maybe make some useful recommendations and suggestions for the 24-25 budgeting process, whilst also taking a longer look at our remit and brief on finance and budgeting more generally. I had hoped that the briefing on Treasury management that we've got scheduled in for September would be teeing us up for a committee meeting looking at strategic planning and infrastructure delivery and the capital investment programme, and also the making the most of our borrowing capability. But I think I would like to take some advice, and possibly Rachel, you might be able to help us out here. Do we need to shift some of these briefings around in order to be able to scrutinise more effectively when we come to the items that are scheduled to be discussed in the committees themselves?
Thank you, Chair. I think we have the first 2 briefings are an overview of the MTFS and the Treasury Management Strategy. Andrew and I will deliver the MTFS briefing along with colleagues from Finance if necessary to provide additional information around that. The Treasury Management one, we plan to use our external Treasury Management advisors, and so we can work with them in terms of whether we how we would like that support to be delivered. I think following on from there, then I can work with Daniel and through you, Chair, in terms of making, as Councillor Chand suggested, that we've got the relevant briefing in advance of the item to be, particularly around the capital investment programme and the items on the December meeting agenda.
Okay, that's helpful. Councillor Bartley.
In terms of Treasury management as well, can I confirm with Government Services that there is actually a member briefing introduction on the Monday next week?
Yeah.
So
yeah, there is a briefing next week, and
so
we delivered again.
We will let together.
Yeah, I think that's a broad overview. Yeah, but the session then in September can be tailored more to the needs and responsibilities.
Councillor Pounds and then Councillor Fagan.
Thanks. And just on the capital investment programme, so Councillor Stoddart has made reference already to the fact that we're reviewing the capital investment programme. Do we have a time frame on that? I'm not sure what the time frame for his review is at the moment, but we will make sure that there's a briefing to support any information that comes from Councillor Stoddart. Okay.
can I just say on that, the assumption for the November meeting, looking at the capital investment programme, is that the budget process for 24-25 will be at a point where the capital programme will know what the new items are that have gone through the review process and are being proposed to be added to the capital programme by that point. If by the 21st of November that isn't likely, I think what we need to do is know sufficiently in advance to be able to move the meeting or shift when that discussion happens, so that we are actually looking at what the capital programme is that will form part of the 24-25 budget. Okay, Councillor Fagan and then Councillor Cornthwaite.
Thank you. My question is about how we scrutinise proposed commission services before they actually sort of come to us as a sort of fait accompli. Because, for example, in the case of early help, we know that early help is going to rely a lot on commission services, but there isn't actually enough budgeted for those services as required to actually deliver the improvements that we know are needed on the ground. We need to be able to feed that back fairly quickly. So I'm just wondering sort of where commission services would fit into this.
Well, I think we're going to have to take advice from Rachel and the finance team about what the time frame is for the budgeting process for this year, to understand when outline budgets are likely to be available, because I think this committee did want last year to take a look at the budget at an earlier stage in its development than its final state, but then it struggled to do that. I think that was partly because of the lateness of the financial settlement and the release date from central government, which meant that there were far too many uncertainties to be able to tie the budget down. I don't have any great hopes that central government is going to change its behaviour to make it possible for us to do that earlier. But I'm just wondering whether there is some earlier point in the process, maybe when you're looking at the savings options, that it might be possible for this committee to make some input at that stage.
I think that's certainly something we consider, as you mentioned earlier, Chair. It's a challenging process in terms of those timescales. Receiving the settlement very late in December, sometimes at the 23rd or 24th of December, and then having to finalise our, at that stage, draft budget presentation in early January. But I think we can work together in terms of understanding what input you might be able to have as we move through the budget setting process and timetable in the autumn.
Thank you. Councillor Cornthwaite.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Cornthwaite, Home Award. Again, as a newbie to to the council, but certainly to this particularly scrutiny committee, and getting our heads around committee meetings and briefings. So I'm just looking for clarification. The briefing meetings are meetings that are given to us by the professionals. This is my understanding. And I would ask, do we have any input or something in the briefing meetings? And then somehow from those briefing meetings, the committee meeting that follows, is that where we look at what we've been briefed about and try to work out what our responsibilities are? And are we generally given guidance as to where our responsibilities in this committee begin and end? Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine as a question. I think the briefings are helping to build our capacity as a committee and treat them as training. to improve our understanding and the broader issues around the kind of things that we'll be looking at in more detail in the publicly facing committee meetings that we have. So, as Councillor Chowns has said, we need to get the cart and the horse in the right order so that we're having the briefings ahead of when we're needing to have that training to ask sensible questions. As far as the committee's remit is concerned, that's published on the council website. I don't believe that that's likely to change. We're broadly speaking responsible for all aspects of finance, the council's budgeting process, scrutiny of its corporate services, and any cross-cutting themes that don't easily sit within any of the other scrutiny committees. And we also have a referee's whistle and a linesman's flag sort of a role in determining if there is overlap between committee responsibilities, which of the scrutiny committees leads on a particular activity, and also approving the other committee work programmes, and also responsible for external communication and sort of public engagement and overall understanding of the scrutiny process.
Thank you.
Chair.
Councillor Crockett.
Yeah, Councillor Crockett, Queenswood Ward. It's just really an apology to you, because I had a connectivity problem at the very beginning of this meeting, so I had to go and get some support. But I'm up and I've got my notes now, which I was slightly panicking about. I'm back in it.
Glad you're back on the bus. Welcome back. Yes, Daniel, please do.
Thanks, Chair. I think for a new scrutiny committee, financial strategy is quite a forbidding topic. There's a lot of it, there's a lot of ways into it, there's lots of different ways that you can approach it, and if you're not careful, you'll end up just spiriting your time away talking, or you'll set off on all sorts of courses of action, which might not necessarily be desperately effective. And some of that knowing where to go is going to be a little iterative in terms of an understanding of the medium-term financial strategy. Will start to highlight some of the priorities and issues for the local authority, which you might want to hook your work on, but until you do that overall work, you won't know where you might want to look going forward. So I would also think of this as well as to begin with a 4-year programme rather than a 1-year programme. As Councillor Harvey's correct pointed out, we're quite late into the financial cycle at the moment. That's just the way it is with an election. But you'll be able to start your work again very early next year once you've delivered some form of commentary or scrutiny on the budget going forward. The process starts again. We'll identify some new topics for the next year and so on and so on. So this year is always going to be necessarily a little curtailed, and you will be going into this a little blind to start off with. So all I want to say is don't worry yourself too much yet. I think as the training happens, as you learn more about the process, I think some priorities will start to emerge in your mind. What I want, as a slight tangent as well, to answer Councillor Jones's question earlier, it has always very much been my intention that any briefing that is carried out on behalf of scrutiny would be open to any elected member to attend. It seems daft not to, just for the sake of a flick of the mouse, to not bring everybody into the room. So that's the intention. And if you spot that we've not done that, feel free to holler and tell us off, and we'll correct it for you.
Well, thank you for that. I think the more opportunities we've got to get a broader understanding of committee remits and what else is going on, the better. So I would encourage councillors and welcome them to attend and participate in any of the briefings that certainly this committee's got arranged, and hopefully the other committees. Councillor Fagan, your question about commission services, I think this is maybe an area where the balance of of activity between this committee and the other scrutiny committees might come into play, because I think if it's a case of understanding what the priority is in terms of the council's investment in, say, early help versus later intervention, having those kind of discussions in the specific scrutiny committees relevant to those service areas, I think is really helpful and important. And if scrutiny is providing feedback to the service areas about what's important, what the relative priorities should be as far as scrutiny is concerned, hopefully those service areas will take that into account when they're looking at where their funding sits against their different service area priorities under the budgeting process, and that'll come back to us that way. But I think getting that balance right between something that is going on specifically in children's or in the health and wellbeing scrutiny committees, and how we see that manifested in terms of where the money is sitting against different service areas, is one of the reasons why you as committee chairs are sitting on the Scrutiny Management Board, and why the work programmes get looked at in the round, so that we can get that balance right. And who's to say whether we get it right or not this time round, but I think it's very much a learning process. And one of the reasons why we've got income and charging on here as something that we will look at is because there is a piece of work that I understand is already going on, looking at income and charging in one of the directorates in economy and place. And I think what we'll hopefully do is get an input on that, but I know that income and charging is relevant much more broadly than that, and it may be that following that input that we get in the autumn, that there is a follow-on piece of work that we do which looks at income and charging more widely across the piece, and that forms part of the work programme that goes on into next year or maybe the year after. Councillor Clark, look. I think Councillor Stark indicated.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Going back to paragraph 9 and some comments on it as it exists. We could get briefing in MTFS too early. I mean, one of the big issues for me isn't the MTFS in terms of the specific numbers itself, but the underlying assumptions on things like inflation, interest rates, borrowing, risk is another one. So while I understand Councillor Challenge's desire to get briefing up front, we could end up with briefing that is too early if we haven't got a clear picture from the finance side of the council exactly what their underlying assumptions are going to be for that MTFS. So I just want you to bear that in mind, Chair. As regards the committee meeting on 19 September, totally agree with getting the proposed consultation approach for the budget as soon as possible. We have struggled every year to engage residents on our budget proposals. We get very few residents actually coming forward to comment on them, which is a great shame, because at the end of the day, all of us as ward members are often taken to one side and saying, well, how did you come up with that budget preset? How can we afford it? And what was the decision-making process? So I'm absolutely 100% sure that that should be on the September meeting, so that's a big tick there. Income and charging, well, I'm relaxed. I mean, the income and charges is the obverse of savings. I mean, obviously, one way of avoiding having to make too many savings across particularly economy and environment, and you know my views about the fact that I think that's under-resourced anyway, is your ability to income and charge and create income streams to offset some of those savings. So I'm relaxed about that. I hear what you say, Chair. If you think that is a good point at which to have that item for SNB to discuss on the 19th September, I'm fine with that. And in that respect, I think as far as the 19th September is concerned, I think that broad framework you've got there I can sign up to. I'm concerned though about these briefing timings, I really am, because I recall having a debate with the Treasury Management consultants where I felt their interest rate forecasts were far too optimistic. They were saying that interest rates weren't going to go beyond 4.25%. They now might be hitting 5.25% in August. And look what that's done to the housing market, look what that's done to people's finances, and it has an impact on this council, and that's the same people who have to pay their council tax over to us, who are having to manage their budgets. So, yes, have briefing in the right order. I don't know, Chair, what that right order is, because I don't know what the timetable is going to be for when the new administration will come out with their main assumptions, their main risks as well, and to be able to give us an opportunity to debate the MTFS in a way that will be meaningful. That's my only doubt. But as regards the 19th September, I'm broadly happy with that as a start of a term.
Thank you. I think your points are well made about the MTFS. We need to start somewhere, and I think for me the benefit in looking at the MTFS as a document that straddles 4 years into the future is that we'll be looking at the MTFS process and principle in terms of how it's put together at this briefing. Plus, we'll have the current MTFS to look at, which we will be, an eighth of the way into, in terms of its four-year structure. And I think that will give us a good foundation, and we can also look at whether the assumptions that were built into it back in November, December last year when it was being put together, how those look now, and the kind of error bars that we need to expect, because of uncertainty. And I think that will set us up nicely to then look at what's changed when we get to January and we have the MTFS as it comes forward with the budget, with the extra year added on the end of it.
I think it's important, given Councillor Conthwaite's concerns, that we make those outcomes clear, that we say this is what we're doing with the MTFS briefing, this is what we expect to come out of that early briefing, but from that we will still be looking to perhaps revisit it and to be seeking the sorts of outcomes that you've just said, so that members are clear that when they're in that briefing session, they know exactly what's going to flow from it in terms of what's going to happen later on in the SNB calendar.
Yeah,
I think that is quite important, Chair, we get that across.
Okay, that absolutely with you on that. And Daniel, I'll have to put that in your capable hands.
Yeah, Chair.
To make sure that we make sure we manage expectations for members in terms of what they're going to get out of attending that briefing.
As Chair, if I might, I should point out all these documents are already in your team space, so feel free to dive in and start reading them now. Plenty in there for you, including a very comprehensive guide on financial scrutiny from the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny. Highly recommended.
A right riveting read.
What about anything accountants? If any is around this table, apart from Rachel.
So, Rachel, while we've got you, I'm keen that we make the most of you, and I'm wondering whether, from your perspective, given that the timetable and the level of uncertainty that continues right until very late on in the budgeting process, is there anything that you would have expected to see in this schedule for our first year of scrutinising the budget that isn't there? Or is there anything that you feel we've missed an opportunity with that we could usefully include at this point?
Thank you, Chair. Just to reference back to one of the points that Councillor Stark made around the proposed consultation, I can confirm that we're already in discussion with our external consultancy support with that consultation process, and they'll be bringing a paper with some options around consultation to the committee meeting in September. So I think that will be a valuable piece of information for you to consider, but using their expertise and their experience of consultation over the last few years in Herefordshire, the take-up demographic to inform your recommendations in that respect. In terms of the medium-term financial strategy briefing in August, Again, recognising that the timing of that doesn't allow for you to scrutinise the proposed MTFS for the forthcoming 4 years, but what that would allow you an opportunity to is to consider the approach rather than the detail. How do we consider the assumptions? What external advice do we make use of? How do we consider risk, scenario planning, etc.? And more around the approach to the MTFF at this point in the financial cycle, ready then to consider the detail once those assumptions, risks, scenarios have informed the actual plans and are presented in draft form to you in January.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. That's helpful. Councillor Baker, I'm conscious that you're with us in the ether. I just wanted to pause a moment, and I haven't seen your hand up, but just to ask whether you've got any points you'd like to make or questions to raise.
Yes, thank you, Chair. First of all, can I apologise for not being with you? We were at planning site visits this morning, and I had car troubles on the way back. So I just made it back home to switch you on my laptop. The only thing I would suggest at the moment is if we're having briefings by officers and reports written, could they be written in such a way that lay people, much like myself, actually understand what you're talking about? But that's all I've got at the moment. Thank you.
Right, plain English then. That's a challenge to the finance team then. At least if we're going to have acronyms, can we have a glossary and that sort of thing, and try and build that up? I think that might be useful for all committee members to make sure that we can navigate these documents easily. Thank you. Good point, Councillor Baker. Thank you for that. Councillor Stark.
Can we move on to the committee meeting of the 21st November, please? I've no thoughts really about whether that's the right time to look at the capital investment programme. I mean, I take advice from Rachel again as whether that would be opportune. What's the thinking behind the closer working with parish councils item? Is that to get them engaged in the budget process, Chair, as early as possible?
For me, it's for several reasons. We've had increasing engagement with the parish councils over the last 4 years, and I think that has been a very helpful and fruitful dialogue that's been created. There's also been things like the Lengthsman scheme, which has recreated some funding that parish councils are able to access in order to be able to undertake work locally. And there are discussions that have happened which have involved the parish councils and certainly the market town councils in providing input to help shape things like TRO priorities and things like that. So if there are emerging opportunities for early dialogue about how parish councils feel that increased engagement has been working, and whether there are further opportunities, whether it's with the city, market towns or the rural parishes, for there to be different ways of closer working and shared service provision between the county and the parishes, that we actually explore that a little bit and understand what the appetite is at parish council level, and also understand what's worked well and where there's been grit in the system to understand how to do it better in the future.
I mean, it would be more useful to my town council, I sit on, to talk about the funding opportunities that might be available to parish and town councils from the county in a way that actually enables them to perhaps design or shape their budget for 24-25 as well. I'm not against closer working, don't get me wrong, Chair, but one of the issues that we always have is what funding streams are available that is going to come from the county to the towns or to the parishes, because we do get occasional grants, we do get occasional amounts of money passed to us. And I wondered whether SNB would want to look at how effective the county is actually running that particular service, because in such straitened times, any help the county can give the parish and the towns would be welcome. So when I saw the item, I thought we might be talking more about funding opportunities as well. But I'll leave that open.
I'm sure it would be good if that came into it. I know there's Talk Community has been working on that all the way through.
Yeah.
And I think
That came out of the parish, working with parishes.
yeah, and there are parishes, and I think Ross may be one of them, that is investing in things like funding a youth worker.
Yeah.
And
we funded a cleansing operator as well, yeah.
Indeed, and I think, where there are opportunities to bring together maybe assets that the council at county level holds with an appetite to fund heads and bodies and legs on the ground to augment what's already happening or not happening in the case of youth workers. I think some of those early discussions in a scrutiny context would be useful.
Yeah.
I think also there are parishes which have got licensed agreements to do additional cuts on amenity grass spaces, where the number of cuts that the county is delivering isn't sufficient to give the finish to parkland areas that local communities are looking for, and to sports play spaces and that sort of thing. So again, understanding where there is activity that is overlapping and where it's working well, and what more the opportunities are to do things, whether or not funding is involved. But if a little bit of money is going to help to oil the wheels, then it'd be helpful to know that, because the administration might be keen to follow some of that up.
And we could propose that. Yeah.
Sorry, yes, I'm Billy Nomates, I've got that. Richard Thomas, Burnside. Sorry, you can probably hear my voice without this, but anyway, I totally agree about this parish council, because I get one or two questions every single meeting I go to. I've got 9 parishes, which means 5 meetings. They seem to be, as we use the word ignorant, but they certainly are very unaware of a lot of things that they, help they can get. And I think that really needs to be sort of pushed out into the parishes.
Thank you. So that's the thinking behind taking it at that point. And I think we need to be guided by the finance team in terms of when the draft capital programme for 24-25 is going to be firming up sufficient that it can go to scrutiny. In previous years, it has gone to scrutiny at around that time frame with the detailed business cases for the new capital programme items, and they've been available for scrutiny to take a look at in detail. Councillor Fagin, then Councillor Crockett, then Councillor Bartlett, and then Councillor Thornbright. Okay.
Chair, just on that point about parish councils, the previous administration, the leader sent out a newsletter every month, and that went to parish councils, and the feedback I had from parish councils was that was incredibly well received, and that it helped them keep abreast with all the different directorates in the area. So I wonder if we could, I realise that this is an item on the agenda for November, but I think that sooner that we try and reinstate that communication from the leader with the parish councils, the more informed they're going to be and the more sort of engaged. So I don't know if we can recommend that to the cabinet.
I think that it is a matter for the leader and the cabinet, but I believe the leader has already given a commitment following the council meeting at the end of this week that he will be doing a monthly newsletter in order to continue to inform parishes and everybody about what's going on. And hopefully it'll be something like the last one, with cabinet members making input for each of their portfolios. Councillor Crockett.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Crockett, I forgot to say Healthcare and Wellbeing Scrutiny Chair, as well as Queenswood Board Member. Just one of the things I wanted to point out, Councillor Thomas, that Talk Parish is something that this council have been investing in and encouraging parishes to attend. So just remind your parishes when those come up. That's the way to engage with this council. I also emailed the leader some weeks ago now asking if he was going to continue with the newsletter, and he was still considering it at that time. So we'll wait and see. Just a couple of other things. I think it's absolutely right. We have clear writing and clear explanations on all documents. Councillor Baker is completely right. You know, we need it in English. Do not use acronyms. The leader, as well as I, are really annoyed with acronyms, and we were talking about it yesterday. So if you are going to use an acronym, explain it first, so that everybody knows what you're talking about. That's it for now, thanks.
Okay, Daniel wants to make a quick point before Councillor Bartlett.
Just say, certainly within the team spaces for healthcare and wellbeing for children and young people, there's a glossary in both of those files for you, jargon busters. Just to give you my assurance as well, and I'm holding myself hostage here because I've written both of the reports that you're considering today, but I generally have a low tolerance for acronyms and just generally delete them and write them out in full, however tedious that might be to do that. So I don't care for them either, but if you see them, just shout out and I'll adapt them.
I do think we're getting a lot better with it. Thank you, Daniel.
Councillor Bartlett and then Councillor Cornthwaite.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the report that we've got in front of us, because I think it's a lot of work that's gone into trying to pull this together. So one of the big pieces that's kind of like the linchpin of what this Scrutiny Management Board is doing, and that is around the finances. So there's this, and there is the work programme that's built around it. So in terms of what we're looking at today, which are the recommendations based on this report, for me, I think we've pretty much, certainly for recommendation C, identifying the topics of focus for the committee's work listed in paragraph 7 and 8, are pretty much there. Supported by paragraph 9, how we go through the financial process of that. But what I'm wondering, and what I would like to see, particularly building on this conversation that we've just started about parishes, which personally I see as one of those cross-cutting pieces of work, doesn't necessarily fit in just one committee or another. It's very much the ground for us to look at. But in terms of the recommendation C, I'm minded to actually ask, Chair, whether we can make that a bit wider and say that it's listed in paragraph 7, 8, 9, 10 and 11, because what we've got in 10 and 11, talking about community impact, is now going wider than what we're talking about with just the finance. And also just really, really drawing, underlining the fact that the environmental impact of the financial strategy is really, really important. We've got a really good phrase, paragraph there for 11 to build on. And I'd just like to see if we could actually have both the community impact and the environmental impact within our recommendations, so that it's a lot more explicit.
Right, so you'd like us to amend recommendation C to list paragraphs 7, 8, 9, 10 and 11?
Certainly 10 and 11, whether it just, 9 almost is a standalone, isn't it, that table? So 7, 8, 10 and 11.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for that as a proposal? Councillor Fagan. Is the committee broadly in favour of that? Do I have lots of nods?
I'm not clear what you're agreeing to.
Just the recommendation C in the report that accompanies the financial strategy that we're debating highlights the not only paragraphs 7 and 8, but 10 and 11 specifically. The community impact and also the environment. Sorry.
I'm still not clear what you're trying to achieve here. Those talk about they talk about this report. So you're asking this report to consider itself. It's getting a bit recursive here.
Are you wanting? Would it be better to? Councillor Chand.
So 8A and 8B both are specific about how resources are managed to deliver on our strategic objectives. And Jamie, if I've understood you correctly, you're just wanting us to emphasise that our strategic objectives include environmental and community objectives. So I read that as included in strategic objectives, but we could perhaps just make it a bit more explicit if that would help avoid the recursive problem.
The impact and the environment. I mean, the environment has been through which we looked at every single decision that that is made, and it's included as a separate section in all the decision reports. But I do take your point. It is important that we're making sure that in the way that the budget is structured, it is given sufficient funding to enable the environmental impact to be minimised, and for us to take every opportunity that we have to deliver our services in an environmentally sensitive manner.
Well, I mean, if the board is happy that that it is implicitly alluded to enough that it's followed, then I'm happy to retract that recommendation, because it, for me, is recognising the financial structures will underpin our community cohesion and our environmental sustainability.
Community and environment are two of the three strands of our county plan, and that's the top level kind of policy framework within which we're doing everything at the moment. Obviously, it may look different for next year, and I think that's one of the things that as a committee we will need to add to our work programme to make sure that we're tracking what's happening in terms of the development of the county plan for 2024 to 2028. But this budget is effectively going to be being projected into that space, so it's transitioning between the current policy framework and what will be the policy framework that's being developed alongside the budget, if I understand the timelines for the new county plan.
In that case, if you feel that it's sufficient, then I'm happy to retract that recommendation.
Okay, well, maybe we'll cover it in terms of walking alongside the development of the next county plan as being one of those cross-cutting things that we add to the work programme, and we take a look at that later on in the autumn when it's ready.
Chair, I might let you pick on a very interesting point there, which I think would actually would help Jenny, Councillor Bartlett in her request here, and that's that you correctly identify the county plan as the absolute nexus for this. So it might well be, I know you want to talk later about how you might scrutinise the development of the county plan going forward. But I do wonder whether or not a briefing on that, but as part of your planning briefings, would help consolidate that understanding. Because obviously your workaround financial strategy can't exist on its own. It has to include how that interacts with policy, and the county plan very much puts two of those three ambitions at its very core for the community and for the environment, as well as economic growth.
Okay, well, I think given that we are at a point of inflection in that it is the last year of the current county plan, and the budget that we're going to be walking alongside the development of is going to be for a new plan, which is in its early stages of development. I think that would be helpful, at least to get some early input for us on what the policy framework and the policy the drivers are that are shaping the next county plan, so that we can bear that in mind as we look at the budget. Okay, would that satisfy? Yeah, okay. Councillor Cornthwaite, and then were you indicating Councillor Stark?
Chair, didn't want to keep going on about parish councils, but just to pick up on them, a couple of points shared. You mentioned Cork Parish, which having been on a parish council now for at least 18 months, never heard mentioned at our particular parish council, so wonder how that operates throughout the county. And at the risk of using just the 4 letters of HALC, the Herefordshire Association of Local Councils, should we filter into them the fact that Toke Parish is available and should be pushed out to the parish clerks, and the parish clerks raise it on parish agenda so people know that that's available. But sorry?
That's what's supposed to be happening.
Well,
In many parishes.
if it isn't happening, if that is the way it's supposed to happen.
All parish clerks in the county are kept informed on a regular basis by Talk Community, every single parish clerk, whether that clerk is filtering it down or somehow the next level communication has got a bit mixed up. But HALC do know about Talk Parish, and they've been involved quite a lot with it. But every single parish clerk in the county has had every single communication from Talk Community. Talk Parish.
Well, thank you, but just in relation to Homer, we've gone through a pretty torrid time with parish clerks and actually settling one down, and it may well be that our new parish clerk is in this loop. Because ahead of that, and before that was mentioned, what I thought I was going to suggest was we embrace the parish council chairman. By it's often thought at parish that Hereford Council don't really care. True or false, that may be. But I wondered if there was some way we could bring parish council chairman together, show them that we really do care, and have some sort of open evening where questions that they think don't get answered could be answered in an event like that. And we show that we really do care about our parish councils. If you think it's already been done, then I don't necessarily want to propose that. But if you think there's any benefit in it, that's what I would like to suggest.
Well, I think it's falling. Thank you. I think it might be falling slightly outside the remit of this committee meeting, but I think it's very much a suggestion to make to the Talk Parish team, and maybe to find out why it is that the message isn't necessarily getting through, or if it's getting through, it's not being responded to by the parish councils themselves, and whether there's a communication issue that needs to be addressed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stark.
Yes, I've already covered the 2 meetings there. I'm not going to say anything about the committee meeting in January. What I'd like to raise now is what might be missing One of the issues we've got in this county is we are a small populated county with a very small tax base. It's very difficult for us to get economies of scale in order to actually get the sort of financial returns that we need in order to actually provide the services we want to provide. In fact, we have had discussions, as you know, Chair, in the past about Herefordshire as a unitary authority, whether it is viable or not. But leaving that to one side, one thing that I would like us to look at is cross-county working in terms of the financial side. I don't know what that means yet. I know some of it does happen. I know we do have some fora where we do work cross-county already, such as West Midlands Regional Rail Network and other things. But I do think as a committee, this is one of the challenges facing this council, is the fact we don't have a big enough tax base to generate the sort of income that will ever be able to satisfy the sort of challenges that we're facing, given the economic circumstances. Maybe not for early on, but at some stage I'd like us to pick that up as an item, Chair, somewhere along the lines.
Well, thank you, Councillor Stock, and it may be that it's something around the whole devolution agenda and whatever it is that central government is doing in terms of encouraging, pressing local authorities to commit to various devolution deals in order to open up funding streams that are kept from them. I know that it's a struggle for Herefordshire when it's hard up against the national boundary with Wales, and the authorities around us are already in other arrangements, making it difficult for us to have a path forward. But I think that's a very interesting point that you make, and our particular circumstances, and maybe working across the Welsh border into Powys and overcoming some of those borderland issues might be something that does fall within the remit of this committee, and maybe we can pick that up under the agenda item on the work programme.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we've given this a good kicking as an agenda item. Is there anything anybody else wants to add, or Councillor Baker online there, or can we turn to the recommendations and look for a proposer and a seconder for those unamended recommendations for the accompanying report?
I'll propose.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, I'll second the unamended.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Crockett. With that, can councillors indicate then those in favour of the recommendations set out in the report? Okay, excellent, that's unanimous, thank you very much. That's great. So with that, we move on to the item number 8, which is the Scrutiny Annual Report for 22-23. And this is to provide an account of the work of Herefordshire Council's scrutiny function and its committees during 22-23 municipal year. So that's the year just gone prior to the elections. So that report starts at page 57 of the agenda pack, and the recommendation is that the report be noted, but there is an opportunity clearly for us to comment on its content and to make any further recommendations that the committee might feel minded to support. So I open it up to committee members. Anybody? Councillor Starr and then Councillor Crockett.
Just to set it in context, Chair, since we are in public session, and the fact that we haven't actually completed an effective scrutiny review, as we were hoping to do as a board, I must admit everything closed down very quickly because of the election. It even surprised me as a committee chair how fast it was closed down. The period of purdah seemed to be much longer than I think we were expecting, and it caught the SNB unawares, Chair. So I'm just raising this for the record in case anyone is looking in as to why we didn't actually get round to scrutinising the effectiveness of our operations last year. And it was because everything was closed down so quickly. So I think this is the best we could achieve in the circumstances. And in that respect, I'm happy to note it. Thank you, Chair.
I think a comment that I would make about the run up to the purdah period is that during purdah, it's a case of being sensitive and not taking decisions that are politically sensitive during that purdah period. I worry that we are overly solicitous of the purdah period, and that there is business as usual. Every cabinet member stayed responsible for their cabinet brief right up until the day of the election, and continued to work on business as usual. So I think it may be that it's something that we do want to comment on, maybe, about just checking whether business as usual includes scrutiny activities. If the cabinet members keep going right up until the day of the election, scrutiny is the other side of the cabinet governance model coin. But I do accept that the committee programme did close off fairly early on in the new year. And Daniel, are there any comments that you'd like to make about this report as you're the author?
Thank you, Chair. I think there are two factors which resulted in a more narrative report rather than an analytical one. Obviously, the purdah period didn't help matters. Actually, I think three here. Second was my own recruitment, which happened very late February, very early March, and really without any predecessor here, no real sort of involvement in that improvement journey that you set yourselves upon through rethinking governance. So myself and my manager made a decision quite early on that it was more important for you to account for yourselves in public and in a public environment than it was to get an effectiveness review right. So we felt that the best thing to do was to get the report you have in front of you, which is an account of the work you've been up to, not just in terms of your thematic committees, but the improvement work that you've engaged on through rethinking governance, and to get into the habit of accounting that annually at council, which Scrutiny hadn't done previously. So this raises the question to you as a committee going forward, which is how do you want to review your own effectiveness going forward? Personally, I feel that doing this with just 2/3 of the municipal year behind you, as would have been the case in February, was doing it too soon. You were still doing the work, as it were, and I don't think you were anywhere near a space where you could meaningfully judge the effectiveness of that work. But we're here now. We have a new administration. You have 3.5 years, if not longer, ahead of you. I would recommend that the committee starts that work in earnest, determining how it wants to measure its own effectiveness and how it can do so on an annual basis to council in a sustainable manner, in such a way that you can deliver it along with the officers that you have at your disposal to do so.
Well, thank you. You neatly bring me on to some points that I'd like to make on that. And I think it sounds like we may need to have a workshop put into our work programme to consider how we go about undertaking that kind of evaluation. Certainly the performance of the Connected Communities committee last week delivered some very effective recommendations that were taken into account, when it came to Cabinet making its decisions last week. And I commend everybody who was involved in the committee scrutiny of the Cabinet paper pre-decision. That was certainly a very effective piece of scrutiny work. How you actually judge that, I think, maybe just in terms of the impact that it had on shaping the way that the decision was actually taken. But there's more to it than that, and I think quantitative and qualitative views will need to be taken. So maybe a workshop later on in the year in our work programme, early enough to maybe influence the thinking on committees in terms of shaping of recommendations. For me, reading this report, albeit a narrative one, Daniel, thank you very much for having authored it. A number of questions were raised for me, and I'm not sure that they can necessarily be answered today, but if they can't, I think it would be helpful for us to get some feedback brought back to us. Sufficiency of staffing and support for scrutiny. One of the things that happened when we increased the number of scrutiny committees under the governance review was that it created an additional workload, not just in terms of the councillors sitting on the extra committees, but also in terms of staffing and supporting those committees. So making sure that the resourcing behind the scrutiny function is sufficient to deliver effective scrutiny and to enable the committees to operate however they want to. I note that over the last year there really haven't been any task and finish groups or any spotlight reviews. And those do take extra officer time in order to be able to staff those up and support them. And I'm concerned to be assured that the resource is there to enable all of our scrutiny committees, if they wish to run task and finish groups, and to be able to co-opt in experts from outside the council to support those task and finish groups work, that we have the capacity to do that. And in financial terms also, in terms of the budget for scrutiny, that there are funds there if we need to buy in additional resource or some technical expertise, that the scrutiny function is able to do that, and it isn't fettered financially or in other ways in terms of the resources supporting this function. So that was a query. On acronyms, sorry Daniel, You have used an acronym that hasn't been expanded. The SMART acronym, it's been around a long time, but it does need expanding in terms of specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bounded. So if we can add that to the glossary,
We'll do so.
that would be good. And I note that in paragraph 19. You mentioned that there is a process being developed for the executive response to scrutiny recommendations, and I just wonder whether it would be worthwhile actually having that come to Scrutiny Management Board for us to cast an eye over it before it's agreed and set in concrete, seeing as it will be effectively about responding to our recommendations. It would be nice to be able to make an input to that while it's still plastic. Just a note for committee chairs of the point that's made in the report about scrutiny of external partners and external organisations. That is a really powerful thing that scrutiny can do. And it's really good when we're able to bring in our partner organisations and to involve them in the scrutiny process. So when you're putting your work programmes together, do make sure that your ability to scrutinise partners and external organisations is appropriately exercised where you feel it's relevant.
Chair,
Councillor Stark.
I'm just thinking of public at large. There are good examples of that in this particular
There are.
programme of work. So I don't want the public to think that we didn't do that last year, because we did in a number of occasions. Thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, it has happened in the past. It's just a case we've got new work programmes that we're working up now, just to make sure that that continues. Those were some thoughts that came to my mind reading the report, which it's a very good summary of where we got to last year, and hopefully we can build on it. Councillor Chance and then Councillor Fagan.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I agree. It's useful. A few points that I thought it might be worth just flagging at this point. So in paragraph 4, where it sets out the terms of reference of each of the committees, just to kind of record or note for the record, I suppose, that we have noted that between Connected Community Scrutiny Committee and Environment Sustainability Scrutiny Committee, there are a couple of areas of potential overlap, particularly in the areas of planning and transport. We've noted these, we've talked about them, we've recognised that in the coming year of our respective anticipated work programmes, there shouldn't be any clash. We've discussed ways that our committees can cooperate and potentially work together jointly, invite each other to hearings and so forth. So we're not at this stage proposing any alteration to those, but we are noting it as a potential issue and a lack of clarity, I think, that's arising out of the work that was done when these committees were originally set up. So it's something to have a watching brief on. Second issue to note, so this is paragraph 13 and kind of onwards. I just observed that 12 is a lot of objectives. I'm just going to leave it there for the moment, but I think that that is a lot of things to be aiming for, and possibly reading through them, I thought I saw a little bit of overlap. So that's something where we might want to kind of pare down our focus collectively. But recognising that this system has been in place for only a year, I'm happy to kind of continue sucking it and seeing, as it were. What else? There is a specific thing in paragraph 27, the section on community impact, which says scrutiny also supports community issues more directly through the work of the Connected Communities Scrutiny Committee. I don't really agree. Connected Community Scrutiny Committee isn't specifically responsible for community-related issues. I think that is it actually reflects something that concerns me more widely, which is that the name of this committee is, I think, unhelpfully vague. Actually, issues relating to community issues more generally understood in the framework of the community impact section of any decision report are in many ways particularly directly related to health and well-being, children and so young people and so forth, rather than necessarily relating to the more economic development and infrastructural elements that are looked at by the connected communities. So again, just flagging, there is a bit of an issue with the committee name, Connected Communities, and other committees really do a lot on community issues. There is a small set of typos in paragraph 33, equality and opportunity, that I've highlighted to the scrutiny officer, but they don't change the sense. Well, they do change the sense, but I think everybody can work out what's meant there. More substantially, so I'm just scrolling down. So it's very useful to have the appendices, the reports, and I think, very helpful to have that summary. I noted the two issues. One is there's a lot of bullet points, and so could we generally just have all reports kind of with numbers and letters, so it makes it much easier to refer to the things that we're talking about. So for example, 15 recommendations are made to the executive. If we consistently refer to them with the same letters, it will aid tracking. And then I noted that the report for SMB it's a different format, the sort of the tabular format in item 6. and more of an action plan which relates what was previously intended rather than a narrative. Take your point, Daniel, just doing a narrative for kind of convenience, but I think perhaps something that is a little bit clearer about what each of our committees sets out to do at the beginning of the year, and then tracking how much we do that, and also enabling us to track anything that's hanging over and still ongoing from previous years. I think a structure like that would be very helpful, possibly looking a bit like that item 6. Thank you.
To reply to that last point, really, I think around the different structure of the scrutiny management report, annual report, and touching on what's been discussed around the effectiveness review. In my personal opinion, I think the scrutiny management board too much reviewing its own effectiveness in the previous administration, and I found it quite the job to unpick sets of objectives, some sets of recommendations, sets of outputs, and they never ever seem to quite align. There are 12 objectives, there are all these roles, and it never really seems to sort of align. So I think one of the jobs that you'll have to do here when you go back to your effectiveness review is to look back on what was done in the previous year, ask yourself which of that's complete, which of it you can safely ditch, and which you want to add to it in the new year. But I think the more streamlined review going forward would be better use of your time.
Yeah, and hopefully we can pick up the whether we can reduce 12 down to a more manageable and memorable number of objectives when we have that workshop, and we'll give ourselves a structure to work to that hopefully makes sense. Councillor Fagan and then Councillor Cornthwaite.
Thank you. I think reading through this document, because when a year ago when we looked at these different committees and what they would be and how they would function and how the scrutiny management board would function, it seemed like almost like a sort of nebulous thing, and we all you can see from this report that there's actually a lot of work that's gone into a really important aspect of work that councillors do. So I think it's really helpful from that point of view. What I'm questioning, I just want to make sure that, because this was a big change in scrutiny that came about in May last year. Obviously, since we've had a change in councillors following the election, a lot of the training that was done was actually done around that time, so a year ago, and a lot of new councillors obviously won't have gone through that training. There has been, I know that there's been a series of training for councillors and on the different committees. I just want to make sure that we're taking everybody with us in terms of the training, so that not only for ourselves who are councillors who've been here for longer, as a refresher and actually being able to sort of cement it, but for new councillors, making sure that they know what's involved with the scrutiny. So there's that point. And the other point I wanted to raise was just about the comms. So looking at this enormous piece of work really that involves the different scrutiny committees, do we need to try and get comms involved in this so that we can actually show members of the public, it can be more outward facing and say, look, you know, this is what councillors are doing in terms of scrutinising how the council works, how it's effective, because I don't think that many members of the public actually realise the amount of work that goes into picking apart the processes and analysing how the council works for the people who live in Herefordshire. So I think this report provides a good opportunity for us to do that.
Thank you, and I think that the question about communications goes back to my query about whether we have sufficient resource, because I think, you know, getting the comms out about what the scrutiny committees do when they sit is an important part of the council's overall governance and operation. And you know, we did have comms come out about the cabinet, decisions that were taken, but I didn't see comms come out about the connected communities recommendations the previous day. So making sure that comms coming out about what Scrutiny is doing is an important part of the governance process that we should make sure is being effectively communicated by this council alongside the governance functions for the administration.
Yeah, very good point, Chair. I've set regular meetings now with the governance managers responsible for governance, the governance aspects of the council. We're going to be meeting at the end of the committee cycle, as it were. Your committees tend to meet 2 monthly and they all tend to meet in the same month. So at the end of July, I'll be having a meeting with the officer to identify what some of the community work programmes, what might be of interest in particular to Coles, what might want to put some resources in before the meeting or indeed after the meeting as well. There's no fixed agendas for those meetings, it's just getting them into diaries, so Scrutiny and comms have a habit of regularly talking with each other about things and how they might best be promoted. Notwithstanding that, of course, there's work ongoing to develop the website as listed in the annual report, and we'll continue on with that.
Okay, thank you. I mean, it may be a good opportunity after the September meeting to just have an overarching sort of comms plan or some kind of service level sort of commitment in terms of what the comms team are going to be providing in terms of support to Scrutiny. Then we can flesh it out in terms of the detail as the programme rolls forward.
Chair, can I just ask about the training aspect? Or are we satisfied that new councillors sitting on scrutiny committees have got an adequate sort of training programme, or that they will be that they are provided with enough information? Whether they actually sort of undertake that or not is up to them, but for them to be able to serve their role on scrutiny committees.
Okay, that's a good point. There's been part of the mandatory training. There has been briefing on scrutiny and what scrutiny is all about. But maybe I think I'd like to turn to some of the new committee members to say, do you feel adequately?
No.
Adequately
We're not objectors on more.
Right.
What's in?
In the scrutiny in general, in fact, in particular what the committees are responsible for, there are several of them and I'm on 2 of them. I still feel I have a lot to learn before I can really contribute well.
I think maybe just reading the documents about effective questioning and how scrutiny can undertake its role effectively. Reading it is one thing. Actually having a bit of role play or a workshop or whatever is something different. Now I don't know the degree to which resources can stretch, but is there anything of the training that was undertaken last year that is recyclable?
Absolutely. My original remit was to carry out some induction training alongside some questioning skills during the induction process. Reading the room when I carried out the induction training around introducing scrutiny, the room was quite clear that it had enough by the time we got in that section. Which is fair, you're only human. I mean, who wants to listen to more than an hour and a half of me talking about scrutiny? I certainly don't. So I took a view to sort of curtail that within the meeting and to offer that again as a standalone topic. So I think it's one area where new members can really struggle. It's just having the confidence to ask questions. And even those who do have the confidence to ask questions quite often don't ask very good questions or make statements with questions and so on. So that's one area where I think we wanted to do some more work. I think apart from that, the plan is The thematic committee of safety children and young people is the training will happen during the course of the year and will be guided to some extent by your work programme, just like we've been discussing now around financial strategy and the work that we will do to support you in that so you're not coming to topics blind. So we'll do with the other topics, certainly with children and young people, for example, we've started to shape that work programme now with that training going forward, now that we have a work programme in place. So I think some of this will come in time. So some of it I will deliver again. In terms of questioning skills is one place I think would be really useful to start. With the thematic things that will happen during the course of the year. And then finally, again, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, if you go to your team space, under files, there's some really good documents in there that can hit the ground running. There's one called a good scrutiny guide from the Centre of Governance and Scrutiny. It's written in plain English and it'll take you an hour to go through that. There's also a workbook for counsellors in there as well that will just help you to shape that work so you're not just reading a document trying to memorise it. And then finally, in the financial strategy folder, there's another LGA workbook for members around scrutinising finances as well. So I would say if you're that bored on a Sunday, there are 3 documents there I think will really help with you. So, and then during the course of the year, we'll top that up with thematic training, and the questioning training will come in due course. Bear with me. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think what I would also encourage committee chairs to do is certainly for this year, and see how it goes, is to have pre-meetings where you actually agree the lines of questioning and make sure that you assist your committee members to take the lead on a line of questioning. And I think, it may be that some of that questioning skills stuff can be drip fed to everybody through those pre-meetings and getting people confident that, they've got an integrated view of everybody's feeling about a line of questioning that they can then take forward in the room on behalf of everyone and be given a 2, 3, 4 question string to just really dive into some aspect of what's being investigated and really kind of get their teeth into it before it opens up for everybody else. Councillor.
Right, well, as regards our group, Conservative group, we have a WhatsApp group. And there's probably 20 messages a day, and this is exactly what you're describing. Some situation, and everybody will give their view on it, and whoever it is in charge will immediately, within a matter of an hour, see exactly where things are going. So why don't these committees, all the committees, have a WhatsApp group? Because then, as you as chairman will very quickly realise if you put something on, we'll either agree or disagree with it very quickly, and from that the strategy will emerge very much quicker than any other method you will have. Just suggestion what other people think, but because obviously WhatsApp is totally secure to our group.
There's the teams as well. Yeah. Again, I think I'm sure I've sent you all regards to this. I can send it to you again if you want to. In your team space, there's an area there called posts. And I strongly encourage you to use that if you've got any ideas. And again, it's totally secure and it's a safe space, if I can use the modern parlance. So you can ask questions in there without anybody seeing them. So you can ask questions, you can put polls in there. For example, I've set one up for children and young people trying to set up a time when people can go visit the MASH, multi-agency safeguarding group. And so use that, put something in there. I know Pauline's had a go at it. Have a try at it and see what you sort of think. And use that as a space to film questions, idle questions, good questions, whatever you want to do really. But I think just get the conversation started on there.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, thanks for the suggestion, Councillor Thomas. And I think it's absolutely,
it's appropriate for political groups to use all the different ways of, communicating and networking with one another and to make life easy. I think as a scrutiny committee, I would rather that we kept our comms on the council systems. So, the Teams functionality has got capacity to integrate that information, as Daniel said, and to be able to share it around. And I think, given that it's a key function of the council, if we can keep it on the council systems, then that would be the best thing for scrutiny business. But obviously, political groups will do their own thing. Councillor Fagan, were you signalling Councillor Cornflake?
Well, I'm in the queue somewhere.
Right, after Councillor Fagan.
Just a point about the teams. Actually, a lot of people aren't used to working with teams, and I do wonder whether something that Democratic Services could actually just have a short session on working with teams, because it's if you, like any system, if you're not used to it, it's difficult to navigate, and I suspect that there are a lot of people, that councillors, who aren't used to working with it and could do with some tips.
Totally agree. Only I've done Zoom before.
Okay, we'll take that away. We'll take that away as a suggestion. Councillor Cornflake.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to go back briefly to the mention of outsourcing work, because we brought this point up when we were given one of the things from our accountant, the accountants of the council, when they outsource all the work to India. And I wanted to raise the point that many of us who are in business have to account for all our suppliers. And I wanted to be very sure that if we ever outsource work as a council or as a committee, that all the suppliers or the people we've outsourced work to would come under that same scrutiny. I just would be happy that that was a guarantee. Does that make sense?
That in terms of whether we can scrutinise our subcontractors.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to look to Rachel to.
I can add, Councillor Conthwaite, one of the outstanding items from the last SMB was to scrutinise people. Exactly the point you're making, because we were looking to see what we could do with these suppliers who were actually getting these services contracted out to them, and whether we were getting value for money from them. So yes, the last SMB was very conscious of your point. I'm trying as within our work programme to have the capacity to scrutinise these the suppliers to us. Yeah.
Well, it does say in the table that SMB is responsible for scrutinising outside organisations.
Yes, it does.
You've got a name, shareholding in live people, so we do need to add people onto our work programme.
Yeah, we do.
And Rachel.
Yeah, in terms of any engagement with external suppliers that we're given by our contract procedure rules and financial regulations, Hoople and any other shareholding, I think, will be also considered by the newly established shareholder committee. I think that committee is currently in stage of how that will scrutinise those shareholdings.
Yeah, I think that the shareholder committee will effectively manage the council's relationship with those, but the scrutiny of those outside bodies at the moment sits with us.
Yeah.
So when we get on to the next agenda item, which is the work programme, we do need to sort of add Hoople and anything else that we've got a significant stakeholding in, to actually just make sure we cover those bases. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. And then I just wanted to sort of second what Councillor Chelm said on paragraph 27 about the Connected Communities Scrutiny Committee, that needed renaming. And the why I would say that is that I asked if I could join one of the scrutiny committees that dealt with people. And then when I talked to Councillor Chelm, I found that actually although it sounds as if it deals with people, it doesn't deal with people quite as much as I'd hoped, but I'm more than happy to serve on that scrutiny committee, I hasten to add. But it wasn't what was said on the tin, if I can go down that route, and so it would be good that that was changed.
Thank you, Chair. I might have a really bad afterwards, actually.
In a good way.
You've got a very big stick.
He might say that he does to you know.
Wonderful minty. We've had a good discussion about this this report. Councillor Crockett, you're signalling.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, just to remind everybody that I'm being selfish actually. Appendix 4 in this welcome report is about healthcare and wellbeing scrutiny. And at that point, I was the cabinet member for the same. So many items from that committee agenda have been ongoing and are continuing to go on. So I look forward to being the other side of the fence, shall we say, to try and clear some of those up. And just to finally thank Councillor Felicity Norman, who was the lead on a scrutiny task and finish group that led for the intensive poultry industry concerns, and that was brought to this committee, well not this committee, the Healthcare and Wellbeing Committee back last year.
Thank you. Any more comments or questions, points to raise from committee members? Okay, well, thank you very much for a very thorough consideration of this as a report and for the debate. And with that, can I seek a proposer and seconder for the motion to note? Okay, thank you. Second, Councillor Cornthwaite. So with that, can I have committee members in favour? Thank you. I know it's just noting, but there you go. Thank you, that was unanimous. Moving on to the work programme item, I think we've identified some of the items in the financial strategy paper that we are content to have put on the work programme as stated, I think. This is a live work programme, so it's not setting it in concrete. Things will be added, things will move around, and even maybe meeting dates will need to move around in order to accommodate the unknown unknowns. But as far as the committee's remit is concerned, which we did have summarised in the report we've just discussed, are there other items that we would just like to highlight, go on the work programme somewhere, not necessarily at any particular point right now, but just really to highlight that there are items that committee members would like to have considered for the work programme, and we look at scoping that and working those up in a bit more detail. Councillor Thomas.
Yes. One of the biggest complaints that I get as a ward councillor is communication. Lack of officers communicating with people, phoning, emailing. Now, I don't know whether that comes under our remit or not, but it's something that really does need to be sorted out. Because at the end of the day, I feel that we'll class all your officers as public servants, but you're the council servants, and really they should be replying to the thing. Because I had just one thing, I had to ring up the registrar because somebody could not get an answer for marriage, and I made a comment, and she said, "Oh, we're very short staffed." I said, "Yes, I appreciate you're very short staffed, but If you don't answer your phone calls today, you've got twice as many tomorrow. By the end of the week, you will give up all chance of ever catching up. And I think it's got to a bit of a stage where there isn't probably enough communication, not people not answering their emails or their phone calls enough. I know everybody's very busy, so are we. But I think that's something, whether or not it comes under the remit of this committee or another committee, but I think it ought to be brought up.
Okay, we'll list that and we'll just gather at the moment, and then we'll maybe go away and try and integrate. But thank you, communication added to the list. Councillor Bartlett, and then Councillor Stark, and then Councillor Chowns.
Yeah, and thank you. I mean, that's a well-made point about officer time, and goes back to what you're saying about resource resilience of our officers. Just interestingly, I was flicking through the original work programme that's attached to the minutes from the last meeting of the SMB, and the ones that they're holding there is Heritage Council Communication Strategy. So there it is. And then, and interesting as well on the reserves matter, there's strategic partnerships and something that we've talked about, the modernisation programme and transformation programme, as well as the asset management strategy that we've talked about in this meeting. So I guess my question is as well, do we want to incorporate anything that was already on the Scrutiny Management Board that we would still like to take forward, bearing in mind that an awful lot of this is not a history in terms of administration change, but stuff that's been around for a while, so the world's moved on sometimes. But those that are in abeyance, I think, are quite useful to maybe consider whether we want to keep them.
Yeah, well, the remit of the committee hasn't changed, and there's no point in reinventing the wheel. So if there's anything on there that is striking chords, then let's consider it. Councillor Stark, then Councillor Chowns.
Yes, we may have a structure out there that we can actually consider as to what areas we could actually delve into as an SMB. There's a lot of debate at the moment about best value and best value principles. I came across today the 7 themes under best value, which is about good practice running an authority that meets and delivers best value. Now these themes are, I'm not saying we take them all on board, but I'll just read them out and see what you think. Continuous improvement, leadership, governance, culture, use of resources, service delivery and partnerships, and your point about community engagement. Now it seems to me that we could usefully, as an SMB, take that away and see whether there are any areas underneath that we might want to prioritise in terms of bringing forward as non-financial aspects of our work programme. It's just a thought, rather than reinventing the wheel, rather as we did last year, SMB, we went around all the houses saying, have you got a topic, have you got a topic, you got a topic. I just think if that's already there, then that should be good ammunition for us to actually ask the council, well, what have you done under one of those themes? And is it actually going to lead to best value in the way that you've done it, such as leadership? So I'll leave that thought on the table, because I think that would streamline what we could use in order to shape a 4-year work programme going forward.
Okay, that's a very different way of looking at things. I think that's interesting, and maybe we need to explore that when we look at the list of particular topics and see if there's either some common themes that we can take to the way that we undertake the scrutiny, or use that framework as a lens through which to look at the work programme. Councillor Chowns.
Thanks. I'm just having a slight blast from the past moment with the use of the phrase best value, which
It's still there though.
it reminds me of working in Belfast City Council in 1997.
It's still there though. It's come round again. It's like playing.
I'm because you posed the question, I am just wondering if there is space for us to think about under, bullet point 1 of our remit in relation to areas which are cross-cutting in nature. So in some ways, those seem to be more the sort of back office-y functions, finance and so forth. But there are some cross-cutting themes that cut across everything we do as a council. And I'm thinking of 2 in particular. One, I'm thinking of, to what extent are we confident that we are really taking into consideration the needs of the younger and future generations in everything that we do? Making sure that we are, stewarding the resources of the county in a way that is particularly focused on the needs of children. Maybe this is all dealt with in the remit of children and young people scrutiny, I don't know, but my sense is that a lot of our focus has had to be very specifically on the specific services that we run, and I wondered if there's a cross-cutting issue there that this council would really benefit from looking at. Are we making sure that we take children and young people and future generations into account in everything that we do explicitly? And the second one, which again is, your committee's remit, Louis, it says climate and ecological emergency. For me, that is a cross-cutting issue. And there are areas of work, for example, if SNB was going to look at Hoople, we would want to look at that aspect of their work.
Yeah.
Is there scope and perhaps a need for this committee to take a look at the extent to which that the recognition of the climate and ecological emergency truly is built into everything that this council does, whether that's how we deliver our care services, what decisions we make on infrastructure and so on and so forth at that full SNB level. My 2 questions / suggestions.
Thank you. I think we need to take that away because, it may be that combining the questions that you've posed with the slightly different way of looking at things that Councillor Stark's just suggested, it may be that in the context of creating some kind of a framework of inquiry, that there are some themes that all committees should, consider in the way that they look at their work programmes and investigate and question. That similarly to the way that we have a common format for our reports, that there are some things that all committees need to make sure that they've considered. And it may be that part of this committee's remit is to come up with that questioning thematic structure alongside thinking about how we actually metricate and measure our success. Councillor Stark.
Yes, I know rivers is part of my remit, but I'm concerned about the Nutrient Management Board and how effective it's been over the last 9 or 10 years. I'm not sure that my committee should look into Nutrient Management Board because it has so many different partners on it and it's so wide-ranging in terms of its scope. I would be happy if the SNB took ownership of scrutinising the performance of the NMB. But if you didn't want to, it's one of the areas that I will need to look at for my committee. But it certainly is so fundamental to what we're trying to do in terms of helping the river to recover that I would have thought SNB might very well want to take ownership of that.
I think that's a good question to raise and one that we need to take away along with the Phosphate Commission and the cross-border partnership and quite where that sits in terms of scrutiny responsibility. and indeed whether there is some sort of multi-authority scrutiny dimension to that, because it involves a number of local authorities on both sides of the national boundary.
But it's important that somewhere in scrutiny we pick up these topics.
Yes.
If it's not going to be SNB, then I will have to take ownership in my committee. That's what I'm saying.
But I think you're absolutely right, and I think we do need to bottom that one out, because that's a particularly complicated thing that we do need to demonstrate we are scrutinising. And I wrap Nutrient Management Board into that. We'll take that away as a question, I think. Any suggestions on this side of the house? I'll dive in with a few thoughts of my own in terms of the work programme. Hopefully, the September meeting we've got on the agenda the other committee work programmes. I'm not sure all of them will have sat by then, but hopefully a number of them will, and we'll have work programmes that we can give a sign off on. I'll come back to you, Daniel, in a minute on that. The implementation plan for the last year of the county plan, I would hope that we are able to take a look at that in September. That should be ready. I mean, it should be halfway done by then, but at least to take a look at it. And following on from the consultation, taking an input on the approach to budget consultation, that we may want to open something a bit of a wider scrutiny on consultation approaches more generally than just the budget, in terms of how the council engages with the public, and I think there may be some communication dimension to that, but really how we consult, whether we are doing that effectively, and how we are maximising the opportunity to get public feedback and input to the decision-making process. The county plan will be being developed. We've already touched on that earlier in the meeting, and having that come to us at an appropriate point, maybe pre-decision scrutiny on that to be able to make some scrutiny input. Risk management. Generally, I know there's some overlaps here between audit and governance area of responsibility, but they tend to be, having been on audit governance, whenever we tried to dive into the detail of what was actually in the risk register, we were told to back off, and that the content was a scrutiny matter. The process by which the risk was managed was for audit and governance. But I'd like to make sure that what we risk manage, and whether we cover all of the aspects of risk on behalf of Herefordshire, that it is right for us as a local authority to cover, may be something that it's appropriate for us to look at. Similarly, information governance and knowledge management, how we actually gather our data, integrate it, share it with our partners, use it to inform our decision making, and make the most of it in a 21st century way, again, is a very broad subject. There is some overlap with audit and governance that we'll need to look at, but I'd like to make sure that that whole information management and how we perform as a 21st century council in managing data and using it effectively, and sharing it securely, is covered off somewhere. We covered measuring scrutiny effectiveness. We're going to be tackling that somehow. And I've mentioned the executive response to scrutiny as a process, and that we have a look at that. So those are the sorts of things that occurred to me when I was thinking about the corporate and maybe some cross-cutting themes that we would need to consider. I'm not expecting that we spanner everything that we've talked about into a 12-month programme, but I think we need to look more broadly at that and hopefully come up with something like a 2-year programme that rolls so that we make sure that we're looking sufficiently far ahead. And also, I've asked that the forward plan for the administration, whatever state it's in, is published as part of the agenda paperwork, so that this committee and all other committees can use that to inform their review of their work programme. And hopefully, I mean, given that we're meeting every other month, you've got to have at least a 6-month look ahead with some degree of confidence to be able to put something into a work programme, give officers the time that they would need to provide reports to come to that an appropriately timed meeting, and for that to happen ahead of a decision being taken if pre-decision scrutiny is going to take place on a subject. So we need to have the forward plan and for it to be in decent shape. So I'm very keen that we start using it in whatever shape it is in at the moment. And if it isn't in good shape, hopefully it'll speed it getting better. Councillor Peggy.
Chair, I think all of those are really good suggestions. One of the other things that come to mind, and this really does come out of a discussion from the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee about unaccompanied asylum seekers, which led me to think more about the impact and response and services to asylum seekers and refugees in the county, and I don't think that it's something that we've actually sort of looked at as a county. The sort of are our services able to provide the right support in terms of housing? I know that there's an impact on housing as Ukrainian families start moving out of their accommodation and into housing. So I think that there's quite a sort of broad sort of brush of impacts and implications for the county in terms of our response to refugees and asylum seekers that potentially we could look at some point.
Thank you. We'll take that one away as well. Councillor Stark.
We've listed a load of topics, but one of the key challenges for us as a board is to prioritise them, and we have to determine how we're going to prioritise them. Possibly we could do it on the amount of revenue that particular topic is absorbing from the council. I don't know, but having a lovely list of topics is one thing. Prioritising it's going to be the key for us to be effective, and I'm not sure how we do that yet. I'm not sure we've even had a debate, and we certainly didn't have that last year, in how we prioritise our topics properly, and I think that's one thing we may need to consider.
Well, I'd be very happy for us to again have a workshop on that, and then bring a proposal to a public meeting in terms of a way forward. I think that might be the most effective way to sort of get through that as an issue. Councillor Thomas.
I come from a commercial background. I've been in my own business all my life. These committees, it's an awful lot of talking, but shouldn't our business and each of us take that subject, research it, bring it to this committee in a condensed form, be prepared to answer questions, and let's get on with it, rather than us all trying to have a complete knowledge of everything, because that is the way that it appears to me is structured, is that everybody needs to have knowledge of something. Surely it would be better if we did, I'm saying the cabinet system is right, whatever, that's another argument altogether. But would it not be better for each of the committee members take one of these subjects and develop it to bring it to committee, rather than us all trying to grasp? I realise that the officers will bring a certain measure with them, but are we not slightly, horse and cart back to front? But as I say, I don't come this sort of background, I come from commercial background, and in that, if we had a board of directors, then each director would take on a responsibility, and he or she would bring it to the meeting with all the recommendations. They've done all the donkey work, and then we go and we basically vote on it. At the moment, it slightly appears to me we talk a lot, but we don't actually do and make decisions. And if we do make a decision, the other thing I want to ask is, are our decisions effective? Does anybody listen to us? Or are we a bit like some of the MPs committees where they bring a lot of people in and interview them and make decisions and nothing ever happens? So, again, being a newbie councillor, I don't know. Can you answer?
I'll have a go. They're good questions from a new councillor and a new committee member, and fair ones. This is the first meeting of this as a scrutiny committee, so where it would be surprising if we were taking and making big decisions straight off the bat. The work programme that we're putting together is shaping the work that we'll be doing as a committee as far forward as it goes, and as I said, that's a live document that will evolve and respond to changing circumstances. In terms of the way the committee works, the kind of thing that you're talking about in terms of taking an issue away, looking at it in a lot more detail, bringing it back with a report, that's what the task and finish group structure does. And it hasn't been used over the last 12 months because I think all the new committees were really finding their feet. But that is a really effective way for a topic to be investigated in a lot more detail. It can involve councillors who are not on this committee. It can involve people who are subject matter experts from outside who get brought into the task and finish group to help to flesh out a problem or to undertake an investigation. So that's how that works. But the whole scrutiny process and the reason for having a politically balanced committee is that we take decisions collectively at the end of the day. So any detailed report on a particular issue would come back to the committee would debate it, and then the members of the committee would vote on recommendations. Good question. What happens to those recommendations? Does anybody listen? Does anything happen? I think the last administration accepted the vast majority of the recommendations that came from scrutiny committees over the 4 years of its term. We're in very early days of this new administration. I do hope that they similarly take the recommendations from scrutiny seriously and accept them and wind them into their decision-making processes. But we have yet to wait and see on that. But I hope so, and that positive approach to and the value that scrutiny brings will be accepted and embraced by the new administration. Councillor Stark.
Yes, we do have officer support on each of the topics, of course, Councillor Thomas, and they're meant to provide us with a report. It's our responsibility to give them what we want from that report in broad terms, but they are often, as you were talking about, the subject expert. So you might have someone who's a project manager expert, somebody who's an accountant, someone who's an expert in environmental health or training standards. It's through the officer corps we are meant to get these reports of the sort of detail in terms of the research and whatever else we need. So it's down to us to give that steer to officers, and I think that's where we would hope to get the sort of information that you were talking about, focused through perhaps one or two people in the organisation, rather than a councillor themselves taking it forward. But I mean, I'm open. I mean, if a council wants to research a particular topic, I wouldn't stop them if they've got the time.
Can I just carry on and to go on that, Madam Chair? But we've got a new council where 2/3 of people are new. I know the backgrounds of at least 30 of them, and I would have thought that we would bring, like, none of us are junior. We have lifetime experience to bring in. And I think we probably would have more practical experience. I'm not deriding any of the staff, because a lot of you do have practical experience, but we'll bring in outside, which is probably what I can see over the 2 months or so I've been in council, is probably rather a closet community, and to bring in some fresh ideas in from outside may be a better, and you might get a better structure. I'd say there's an awful lot for the staff to do anyway, and to clutter them up maybe with just getting down to the minutiae of what their experience doesn't actually cover might be, you know, so I think it's probably a room for both.
Yeah.
Maybe as a councillor, if we take on a project, we will obviously work with that officer who's got that expertise in it. Between the 2 of us, 3 of us, or wherever, I'm sure we could come up with some pretty good ideas. Blue sky, or whatever they used to call it.
Well, that all sounds very positive and encouraging. I think, you know, every councillor on this council brings, you know, outside knowledge and expertise with them from their careers and their lives outside of the council. And, you know, it's exciting that we've got new councillors joining the council in May, and, you know, we're just finding our way in terms of what expertise and experience and skills they bring to the council body. And I think one of the powerful things about the task and finish group approach is that it isn't just members of this committee, it is any member of this council plus co-optees from outside who can be brought into the task and finish groups to do exactly what you're talking about. So I hope that there will be opportunities for all of the committees to set up task and finish groups where there's, you know, a bigger piece of work to be done. And thank everybody for the discussion that we've had on the work programme. If there are no more comments or inputs on that, I think we'll take away the suggestions that have been made, and maybe schedule a workshop to go through them and to look at the prioritisation of the work programme, so that we can bring something back to the meeting in September, and also receive from the other committees any cross-cutting themes or clashes and overlaps where a way forward needs to be identified, so we can get that dealt with in September as well. So thank you everybody for your debate and input on the work programme, and I think there isn't anything other than accepting your inputs on that as a work item. So last item on the agenda is date of the next meeting, which at the moment is scheduled for the 19th of September at 2 p.m. I hope you can all make that. And as chair, I'd like to thank you all for your positive involvement in this. Is our first meeting, and before I close the meeting, I'd just like to check with the Democratic Services team that the live stream has been switched off and that we're no longer